Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We have reached the keynote panel in the Benelux Private Equity Conference. My next speaker is obviously the keynote, and is also a man that has dedicated his life to sustainable growth, is steering the committees on the 100% Impact Family Office Network Office, and is currently the CIO and the co-founder of the German family office, Wermuth Asset Management, that invests in sustainable investments. Please welcome Mr. Wermuth.
Okay, thank you very much for being here today. I come from Berlin, Germany, and I understand that my parents used to come to Sandford and make big holes in the ground. And the Dutch would look at them, what are they doing in the hole? And the Dutch would sit behind nice glass walls, enjoy the sun, and be happy. And so I hope since then we learned a few tricks from the Dutch. Germany has brought a few horrible things to the world the last century. We hope with the energy transition this century, we've brought something better to this world. What I'd like to encourage all of us in the private equity industry to do is to see that we are the key to success for changing the path of humanity. We have the tools today to profitably change and stop climate change, i.e. to make money and have positive impact at the same time. The group of investors that Daniel's mentioned is called the 100% Impact Investing Group. It's now about 5 billion, is the largest family office from 10 million to 5 billion. They've audited their performance for the last 16 years, and they came up with more than market returns, and therefore we'd like to see how we get there. You're aware of the global megatrends. It's a fascinating time to be an entrepreneur. It's a fascinating time to be on this earth. It took 100 years to get to the first billion people in the middle class. It's going to take just 10 more years for the next billion people. So it's a fantastic time. If you're in the energy business, it's a great time. Even with the best energy efficiency, energy consumption will double again. And 6.5 billion people, of probably 8 billion people, will live in huge cities. They all need lots of things. So it's a great time if you're selling stuff. We have wonderful Xuan here from Shanghai who will understand the next picture. Unfortunately, it's quite dire if you are in China. Now, in Germany, of course, we are world champions in soccer, in case you didn't know. We're also world champions in cheating on your software in the car. So if you need any help, give us a call. I can assure you that while Amsterdam looks nice today, the IMF has clarified that CO2 emissions cause 70 euros per ton of local health problems, asthma, allergies, cancer, and 70 euros of international climate change problems. So if someone emits CO2 and we don't see it, it still causes serious problems. I don't call it a carbon tax that we need. I think it's a cost contribution we need because, frankly, it's quite unhealthy. And if we don't get it here, the Chinese, I think, are getting it. But there's more to come. If we do not act quickly on climate change, the sea levels can rise very seriously. I used to invest happily in Russian oil and gas company and donate some money to good charities until one day I met a guy from Greenpeace who'd been to Greenland. And on Greenland today, there are 3,000 meter deep cracks of meltwater. The Greenland ice cap could slip into the sea. Now, I used to study physics and mathematics and economics. When he said the number that if the Greenland ice shield falls into the sea, there would be 7 meter higher sea levels, I thought he must be smoking dope. Well, he wasn't. 7 meters is just Greenland. 60 meters is Antarctica, and this is your hometown. Unfortunately, also my hometown, Berlin, will be underwater. 67 meters sounds a lot. It's not a lot. We're already 100 meters higher than we used to be. The Bering Strait was the way that the Asian populations moved into North America by foot. The difference is it took 10,000 years last time. This could take 50 or 100 years, and it's too fast a change for humanity to survive. So make no mistake, there is very serious evidence. The guy who produces this sits in Einstein's office in Potsdam. He's not a joker. He's the guy who sat with the Pope to write the Laudato Si encyclica and this is a serious threat to humanity. The good news is fantastic. We need this little speck of space here to power the whole world. That just seems unbelievable. I have this map, full world map in my living room, and everybody goes there and can't believe that's the truth. This is how little space we need. There was a project called Desert Tech almost 20 years ago that said, we'll do this, but they couldn't because the price was too high. A nutty friend of mine started the feed-in tariff in Germany in 2000 at about 700 cents per kilowatt hour. You pay 20 cents here in Holland. All of these years, it was crazy to invest in clean tech. It was crazy to invest in renewables. It was crazy because you're depending on Germans paying the subsidy every day. You're depending on English, Spanish, other governments. But what happened here in 2005 is a breakthrough. The world is no longer recognizable. Al Gore says a dam is broken. What happened was a tender in Dubai was won by solar against wind, oil, gas, coal, and nuclear, and the current record is 3 cents per kilowatt hour. They translated it and said, if I can produce oil at $5 a barrel, I'll be sorry to have used solar. BP sued them, Shell tried to sue them, because if they're right, who should invest a penny more into oil exploration? It is economic suicide. Yeah, you can lift maybe at $50 in the North Sea, but not at 5. So as power production goes, we're done. Solar, wind will take over, even if the guy from my backyard called Drumpf, who's renamed himself a bit called Trump, wants to stop things, this is unstoppable. This is now market economics on power. The EIA, however, says we need 35 trillion euros, or 1.5% of GDP, for the next 35 years to stop climate change. That's huge. Can we stop this? Well, it turns out when we invented solar in 1970, it would have cost us 150% of GDP. That's huge. My income times 1.5 every year to be invested to stop climate change, not doable. What is it today? With 50,000 euros average income, we're talking about 750 euros a year of investment per person in the EU, the price of a fake Gucci bag to make it happen. Okay, that is doable. Now, don't underestimate the potential of humans to be irrational and not to do it. Jørgen Randers of Norway says he's depressed. His wife tells him to smile, but he's depressed because he thinks humanity is too stupid. So I'm here today because we're not humanity, we're the private equity industry. We know how to do a few things. We know how to have capital gains, leverage, and how to have IRs, and how to do efficiencies. And with that, I believe we, the private equity industry, can change the world. The numbers are impressive. We're now down to €1 even for 1 watt peak of capacity. €1 billion buys you 400,000 tons of CO2 cut. ABP alone could just eliminate Dutch emissions if it put its money to work. 91 trillion in solar would cut global emissions. That's huge numbers, but thank you to the great liquidity we have, $1 trillion in equity, leveraged, recycled over 35 years 5 times, with capital gains, would be enough to stop global emissions. 0.33% of global financial assets. It is certainly doable, and what's more, it's fun and profitable. This is my wife on her birthday. Little early adoption problems, how to close the roof, so she used an umbrella. This is a Tesla Roadster. When it came out, it was very expensive and rather slow. The new version is big, has 7 seats, and it goes from 0 to 100 in 2.5 seconds. And by the way, Holland is world leader in this implementation of these guys. 2.5 seconds is faster than we all fall out the window, yeah? 2.5 is faster than G-force. It consumes 1/3 the energy, so 2/3 less. It doesn't give you cancer, it doesn't give you allergies, and the great news is, thanks to my Dutch colleagues and a fund that we run, we invested in a company called the Mobility House, which is now using a car called Nissan Leaf that costs 18,000 euros, not 150,000 like the Tesla. It charges the battery at night, the car drives to work, it puts power back into the grid, and it earns 1,000 euros. So you have a car that costs you as much as a Ford Focus, that consumes 1/3 of the fuel, and it earns you money. In the future, we hope it'll pay the whole car back. As a result of power being cheaper and transport being cheaper, we believe we're in the middle of a new industrial revolution, and everything we knew about the past is no longer true. Regression analysis, IEA, international energy, won't work. Here's what happened in the last industrial revolution. In 1900, on Easter Day parade, you only had horses. The best investments were the whip makers, the carriage builders, the horse breeders. The Dow Jones Index #1 had what? Steam engine railway companies and Western Union. Just 13 years later, this industrial revolution delivered on the same day parade only cars. And guess who's in the Dow Jones Index? Not a single steam engine company. So we are now in a new industrial revolution, and everything you have in the listed space is likely to be blown out by the companies that are now coming up. Just like Amazon and Google and Uber have replaced additional players, the renewable energy champions, the resource-efficient champions, the electric mobility will replace the current champions. And thanks to regulation, it will take much longer for these companies to get listed. So the job for the private equity industry will become huge. What's the implication? The implication is that it's on every asset class. If you own an oil company, if you own a coal company, if you own a gas company, if you own Daimler, if you own any of the German car suppliers, Bosch, anything else, they will all disappear because nobody needs these combustion engine cars anymore. As a result, if I'm a pension fund or a family office like ourselves, we have an impact on every single asset class. I will probably be selling my Russian and Mexican and Brazilian bonds because the oil price is under pressure from competition. I'll be probably worried about German car makers. On real estate, if I know how to use the technologies that we develop here in the growth stage, I can do much better. So what we see in the institutional investor group on climate change is that investors with 24 trillion euros under management, pension funds, are saying they're looking to decarbonize all of their portfolios because they see the risk of the carbon bubble imploding. You've heard about the carbon bubble. The mortgage bubble in 2008 was $15 trillion. The carbon bubble, the amount of revenue of oil and gas companies that will be written off, is already $23 trillion, 50% bigger. So there's a real risk, and the G20 Financial Stability Task Force under Mark Carney is looking to address that issue by getting people to decarbonize. This is a map of the world, which in fact the IT person didn't get on the world, but that's fine. That's the world in the future. These are the regions of the world that either have carbon tax regimes or carbon cap and trade. China is about to join. Sweden here has 130 euros a ton of CO2 tax and is the 6th fastest growing OECD economy. It's quite clear that if you tax the stupid waste that causes you health problems, you actually grow fast. So the IIGCC, the Institutional Investor Group on Climate Change, any economist I'm aware of says we've got to start taxing carbon because otherwise we kill ourselves. Now, happily, as investors, we don't rely on governments. We do nothing that depends on governments. We can make money even without them. How do we do this? We look at the areas that are likely to be winners in the futures. We're looking for the new JP Morgans, the Carnegies, the Rockefellers of this new industrial revolution. And where are they? We believe that in the resource efficiency space, we can make a lot of money. We believe in clean air. There's lots to be done. There's a great company in Holland that you paint a tunnel and the paint eats up all the bacteria and all the bad stuff and it stays white, for example. Solar, wind power projects are boring. They give you 3% return, but companies that make them more efficient are really exciting. Industrial processes, clean water, storage, efficient agriculture and mobility, I think, are the future that we look at. As a family office, we're invested across all asset classes. But my day job is I work in the growth stage private equity fund that we've set up, and we do the following. We invest in EU growth stage companies, and we help them to sell their product to markets around the world, which consumes 4 times more energy than the EU. So a Chinese tends to produce a cup with 4 times more energy and 8 times the emissions. So if we only export our know-how from the European Union to emerging markets, we can cut global energy consumption by 3/4 and global emissions by 1/8. And by the way, it's really good business if some rich Russian, I have a Russian wife, so I can make fun of them, buys you a Wermuth phone for 1,000 euros up front, right? I sold him the phone, I'm fine, I have no risk, I got the upside from the emerging market without any of the risk. So what we do is we help EU companies to go to these emerging markets, and in doing so, we cut energy consumption, resource consumption, and we address 5 of the global goals of the United Nations. And all of that is doable, we believe, with positive impact. I don't know if you've seen this slide from the impact investing world. This is sort of impact 101. Above this line here, you have a positive return. Below, you have a negative return. On the right here, positive impact. On the left, negative impact. If you're a philanthropist, you're looking to do good, but you don't want your money back. Most fund managers are stuck here. They don't know what's going on. I call them sort of driving drunk without knowing it, yeah? So you drive drunk, you hit a woman, and you say, sorry, I didn't know I was drunk, but I think it's worthwhile checking what's your impact. Impact is if you want to have a positive return and a positive impact, sorry, this way and this way. Now in the impact space, unfortunately, some people have sort of made it look like it's an asset class. Of course not an asset class. Every single investment has an impact. If you have €1 at the bank account at ABN AMRO, and ABN AMRO invests the money to lend it to a bomb maker, you've had an impact because you deposited the euro there. If you deposit the euro and say, ABN AMRO, can you please tell me that you will only invest my deposit money into certain ethical companies, green companies, then you also have an impact. There's some people who say, I want 2% return and lots of impact. These are impact first. There are people who say, I want to have finance first and a bit of impact. I believe as an industry we should all focus on finance first and a bit of impact, and we'll change the world in a major fashion. I also think that impact measurement and hurdles on impact will become complete standard. The goal of the 100% impact investing community is to say the whole financial system will always measure the impact you have because it matters, just as risk and return matters, and it's now possible to have impact hurdles, with your portfolio. So in this fund, for example, if you cut so many tons of CO2 or so much water, you achieve 60% of your impact hurdle, you get 10% carry. If you get 80% of the impact hurdle, you get 20% carry. Of course, the measurement has to be done by an independent auditor. The LP and the GP have to negotiate the terms, and our wise colleague Michael Choi in the back invented the idea that if the carry is not due to the manager, then it should be donated to charity, so then there's nobody competing over the carry, but you can trust each other that you come up with a fair solution. How does it look like in reality? Well, this is the Green Gateway Fund 1, which has seen its portfolio companies triple its revenues, double their valuations in just 3 years by taking boring EU companies and sell their products to emerging markets. So it's possible to make money and have an impact. So I think we, the private equity industry, are the ones that know how to make companies more resource efficient. We, the private equity industry, are by definition impact investors because everything we do, we try to impact companies to be more efficient. We need the new companies that are not listed yet to make a difference, and therefore I think we can do it. And I was in a conference in Frankfurt, and the German president came to see us, and he said, "Gentlemen, I'm very pleased to be here with people from the private equity industry. It is very rare that I meet a group of people held in lower esteem than the politicians." So they called us the locusts in Germany, and I hope we can change that. I hope we can make clear that an upright businessman, an Ehrbacher Kaufmann, is what will change this world for the better. We have the finance skills, we don't have the dreadlocks or the Birkenstocks, but we can do it. So here's some examples, and then I'll let it to you to ask questions. Here's a company which you are probably known, and not as much in Amsterdam as in Rotterdam, which is the world's greatest port, I understand. But I thought that when a big ship like that crosses the ocean, they set their big diesel engine at optimal torque and off they go. Turns out, every few seconds, there are 6 more engines on the sides of this boat, optimizing the positioning of the boats in the waves and the wind and so forth. And as you rev up and down with a diesel engine, you waste huge amount of energy. And so one Norwegian company that also built the first Norwegian electric car called Think has started to equip the Maersk and Lloyd ships with electric drivetrains on the side. And they save 20% in the cost of an ocean crossing. Now people tell me, this is the dirtiest industry of all. There's no regulation on shipping. Right. We don't care. We just make money. We save 20% of energy and with it 20% of the emissions. Grass paper, an unbelievable story. I thought papyrus was invented 5,000 years ago by the Egyptians. Papyrus, it turns out, was not patented. And a German guy 11 years ago got the patent for papyrus. He's not growing a tree and making that into paper. He's using grass to make paper. There's also a great advantage if you recycle old paper and make your, what do you eat in Holland? Anyway, your herring. Yeah? You put your herring on a nice little carton. That carton, unfortunately, is 30% made from recycled paper. And in that recycled paper, guess what? You've got the ink from the previous use. So when you eat your herring, you're actually eating the petroleum. So you'll be getting cancer from eating recycled paper carton stuff. Watch out, that's the next Dieselgate, okay? Now, if you use grass, this doesn't happen. It costs a third of the paper pulp, it costs half of the recycled paper, and it saves 75 of CO2 emissions. Is that difficult? Do you mind reporting the impact of 75%, or do you think that entrepreneur is really proud? He's really proud. When Advec said, I will force all of my fund managers to report the impact, they said, you're crazy, it's never going to happen. Advec pushed, when they were still much smaller, I think €1 billion in asset management. And the fund manager pushed the portfolio companies. And they came back and said, yes, we cut this much CO2, and they have the data. And yes, you make money at the same time. Good food. Now, my Dutch colleague, I have to say, in this case says it's actually a chemicals business because he doesn't think tofu is good food, he thinks that's chemicals. But anyway, advanced materials, or good food is the code name for this company. It turns out that if you eat a burger, a hamburger, you spend 6 months worth of shower water just to make that one burger. You spend 26 times as much energy to make that one burger than a tofu burger for the same amount of protein. And guess what? If you put the right spices, it's all the same taste. Even though I do eat meat, this is much more efficient, it's cheaper, and it saves 97% of the emissions. Do I mind reporting that? No. Is it a nice company with 50 million euros about to go to 500 million? Nice company. Primex. Now, this is an unbelievable company to my mind. This is a real portfolio company, not just a planned one. They make these sort of concrete floors. They're really an IT company, without cracks and without joints. So they can make an Ajax Amsterdam football pitch in concrete, without any cracks, without any joints. They do it 3 weeks faster than the competition because there's no more armature, no more metal bending. They use nanomaterials and steel fibers. The thing is 40% thinner than most concrete floors, and cement production makes up 7% of global emissions. So you can cut half of global emissions nearly by simply having floors that are cheaper, stronger, nicer, no cracks. Great stuff. Just need private equity guys to grow this thing up. It's now at 30 million euros in revenue. It should be billions. So please come, buy, manage, run, restructure. Last but not least, back to our company, the Mobility House. So they used to be a crazy startup. Now Daimler and Mitsui bought in here. They will turn electric car batteries in their 3 life phases into assets. The electric car battery in the car itself. You bought the electric car to go to work and come home and drive the kids to football. But in fact, by buying the electric car, you delivered the solution to the energy transition. When the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, these cars will be sufficient to stabilize the electric grid in Germany. And we didn't pay for the battery because you paid for the battery because you want to drive. You figured out, I don't know if you sat in a Tesla, you get the Tesla smile, you know? You sort of, woo, it's like a roller coaster. That's more fun. Even this car, which my wife and I drive every day, is a lot of fun. It goes whoop, no sound, very fast. You bought it because it's fun. And you delivered the stability to the grid you need. And by the way, you're saving 66% in your fuel cost, and you're saving 66% of CO2 emissions. Yes, there's an old system that's defending the status quo. Mr. Tillerson, I met personally for dinner after COP21. I said, Mr. Tillerson, what do you consider COP21 to be? It seems to me the world has concluded that we should stop climate change. It's a serious, urgent matter. Would you consider not spending $500 million a year on climate change denial? And he said, Mr. Wermuth, you want me to disarm? I have shareholders who want me to invest in oil, gas, and coal, and I need to defend the rationale for this stuff, and I will continue to finance the denial policies. So a lot of the knowledge that's in your heads now is the result of that propaganda. I lived for many years in Russia. I know what propaganda is, and look forward to speaking to you in a question and answer sessions and going through one after the other. We'll get to that in a second. So we're at the end of an age, and it does not require the end of the oil, it does not require the end of gas, it's simply new technology. Nobody's going to look back. There's a very wise man, he's the oil minister of Saudi Arabia. He said in 2000 already, the Stone Age ended long before we ran out of stones. This is the Saudi oil minister in 2000. Today he says, we will be exporting solar power. Why? Because we got the most sun and we got the most sand. Solar power is made from SiO2, quartz, sand. 80% of the world's surface is covered in sand. If you cut Si and O2, what do you get? Silicon and oxygen. Not bad, really, if you organize it well. And you get power. So I believe that private equity can profitably deliver a world with abundant, decentralized power at zero marginal cost. Just let that sink in for a bit. The former German Minister of Environment likes to say, we're moving to a flat rate on energy eventually, on the other side of that hub. Because the additional cost of solar, wind, or geothermal is zero. So just like you have flat rate power data on your iPhone, you will have flat rate energy eventually. Decentralized means that I am the owner of a power plant. I have a passive home with my own solar power panels, my own geothermal, and I sell my own power. I charge my own car. I become a much stronger citizen. The inventor of the German feed-in tariff was not a renewables guy or a green guy or anything. He was a Democrat first of all. He said, to get 2 billion people out of poverty, we need to give them power and we need to empower them. So I think, especially today, this is a great perspective for Europe. And maybe the last story to share is a story of a German growing up. Yeah? So you grew up, probably yourselves, loving your grandparents, and so did I. So you go around this lake with my grandfather. And one day we learn about the Holocaust and the Second World War. So I say, grandfather who was in the war, why didn't you stop it? And he says, well, son or grandson, I didn't know, and I couldn't do nothing about it. And I said, fair enough. And a few years later, I go around loving my grandfather around the same lake, but I have another lesson of history, and I learned about the Euthanasia program. The Euthanasia program is a program where Hitler decides to take elderly Germans, handicapped Germans, people with one leg from World War I, and gas them. They were the first to be gassed ahead of the Jewish extermination. Within 6 months, the German people knew, and within 9 months, they stopped Adolf Hitler. So I asked this to my grandfather, and he says, well, and he had much to say. And our enemy today is not an Adolf Hitler. Our enemy today is one Gucci bag a year. We know what to do, it's profitable, and we can do it. On this dark note, let's get happier. I have a great movie that I loved by Woody Allen, and here's Woody Allen. All you ever wanted to know about? Sex, and never dared to ask. Today we're at the Benelux Private Equity Conference, and I offer you to ask everything you ever dare to ask about renewables, electric vehicles, industrial revolutions, or impact. Happy to take your questions. Thank you very much. If there are any questions, let us know. We have 5 minutes more, I think. And I think we have roaming microphones.
Yes.
Yeah. I had one question before at lunch, which I'll pick up right away. It was, how on earth do you measure? Lots of pension funds want to do impact investing in Holland. It's very fashionable, but how on earth do you measure? If someone feels good or feels bad, how do you measure this impact hurdle? So we have Michael Choi in the back corner there. Can you wave for a second? He's the inventor of the first ever private equity fund with an impact hurdle, and he'll be able to help you in the details. But basically, there's an organization called GIN, Global Impact Investing Network, that will say, if you make an investment into a company and you hope the company will cut 3 tons of CO2 emissions, the GP will declare this goal to the LP Advisory Council, and then over the holding of the period, an independent auditor will measure, have we cut as many emissions, yes or no? And you say, I've achieved 100%, 50%, 150% of that KPI. Then you aggregate that across all portfolio companies, and you get a total KPI of, say, 80%. In that case, you do get your carry. If it's less, you don't, and so forth. It's more difficult with social impact. It's very difficult to measure if you manage to get an autist employed. An autist is a wonderful code cracker or software tester, and of course he's also happy to be working as opposed to being unemployed, but that's something I have difficulties measuring. That's why I believe as an industry it's worthwhile focusing on resource efficiency, environmental impact, which is measurable in tons and kilograms and in other easy to measure stuff. If we push on that, we can fight climate change and make a lot of money. And maybe the social philanthropy or social impact is something that's more for venture philanthropy and less for the private equity industry. I don't know, but that's very difficult. You can spend lots of money getting advice how to measure, and you never get going with business. If you have hard questions, it's easier. Are there any questions you have? Anyone? No, if not, we have a wonderful coffee break, I'm sure. Okay, thank you.